There's healing in his hands for you. There's healings in the hands of Christ within you. Charles Fillmore once stated, those hands, those healing hands, are stretched forth and placed upon you, and you are made whole. It's a wonderful idea. It's a beautiful image. This week, the chapter is called Heal the Sick. And the first place to start is healing the sick. Where? At home. In us. The thoughts, the attitudes, the concepts we were handed as little kids that are still in there, that tell us a lot of things that aren't true about ourselves and about our life. Now, there's a story of one of the healings of Jesus in the Bible. It's in the 17th chapter of Matthew. And when they came to the crowd, a man came up to him, kneeling down before him, said, "Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is an epileptic, and he suffers terribly. For often he falls into the fire, and often into the water. And I brought him to your disciples, and they could not heal him." Jesus answered, "O faithless and perverse generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him here to me." And Jesus rebuked him, and the demon came out of him, and the boy was cured instantly. Then the disciples came to Jesus privately and said, "Why could we not cast it out?" He said to them, "Because of your little faith. For truly I say to you, if you have faith as a grain of mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move, and nothing will be impossible to you." It's a nice story. It appears in, that was Matthew 17. It's in Mark 9. It's also in Luke 9. So it appears 3 times. I didn't use Mark's version. That's the longest. It is also one of the most vivid and sort of indicates the possibility of somebody actually being present at such an occasion, as if it's an eyewitness testimony. Luke and Matthew were a little bit more reserved, economical, shall I say, in the telling. They don't quite give as many details. But the beginning focus and the final focus is the inability of the disciples to heal the boy. Jesus made a great statement concerning faith, and it's in the Mark version, which I didn't put up for you. One of the great statements concerning faith there, this healing appears to require the Father's faith. And in Mark, he says, "I believe, help my unbelief," which seems to affirm his faith in Jesus' power to heal the boy. Yet still admits that he's got somewhat of mixed feelings, mixed doubts about the situation. Not necessarily lack of faith. Well, of course not. Remember, faith is one of those 12 faculties, right? You have it. You always have it. How can Jesus say it's a grain of mustard seed? Because you have it. Quantity is not an issue. You don't need more faith. You have it. but it's like an investment house. You have to invest it in something. So the father's faith vacillates between, I have faith that Jesus can do this, I have faith in something else occurring and the boy not being healed. We sometimes place our faith in the presence of God, and sometimes we place our faith in the absence of God. I know you do, because I do. Sometimes we really are tricky. We vacillate a lot between one thing or another. Yes, I believe, help thou mine unbelief. But I have areas in my life where I don't believe. So help me get through those, get past those. In this setting, he talks about the kid falling into fire. That sounds pretty nasty, doesn't it? But remember, in a Middle Eastern house, there could be several ovens dug into the floor and uncovered. So if he has a seizure, who knows where he might land? When I was teaching junior high school, oh, Lord forbid, talk about the perils of Pauline. I was walking down the hall one day past staircase from the second floor. And for whatever reason, as I was walking past, I turned towards the staircase. And at the landing just above the floor I was standing on was one of our students who had epilepsy. And he chose then to do a seizure and started going down the steps. And I managed to catch him just in time. So imagine a child with epilepsy in the house with a fire pit in the middle of the room. Could fall in the fire. Or in a container of water. Wouldn't know what might happen. In those days even, of course they crossed rivers and streams, but they didn't always have bridges. They forded them. They waded across. And he could certainly fall at that point in time. Talks about demons or spirit. And in that culture, at that time, if they didn't know the cause of a disease, they attributed it to spirits, evil spirits. Well, how do you fix it? How do you take care of an evil spirit? A thing called an exorcism, right? Yeah. So today we can see this as a mental or an emotional healing. How many times do you hear something from a doctor and he says, oh, this is simple, there's nothing complicated about this particular condition. But doc, you don't understand. It's really bad. We want to tell them how wrong it is, how sick we are. Sometimes we have all these excuses of why we can't be well, can't be healed. Now, the father in this story who says, Lord, I believe, help thou mine unbelief, represents the state of consciousness that we can be in when we have faith, when faith is required, and we have some mixed concepts in mind. I believe in health, but what about this disease process? What about this illness? It sure seems real to me. It sure feels real, right? And it's hard to accept the idea that the I of you, the God part of you, is eternally whole and well. Sometimes in the midst of something else, right, where something else seems to be making its presence known, it's hard to hold to that idea that the I of me, the Christ in me, the very Spirit of God in me is pure and perfect and whole and well. But we can reach that place. It's not unattainable. We can reach that place. And Jesus says, don't believe what you feel. Don't believe what you see. Remember, he says, all things are possible. All things are possible. You can be healed. And I'm going to flat out say it. I do not believe there's anything that God can't heal. Spiritual healing is possible because what are we really? Spiritual beings. And spirit is what? Whole and well. Now, the disciples wanted to know, oh, Jesus, why couldn't we do this? These guys were not known for having any really special talents. These were not a group of world-class healers by any means. They were regular guys. And they wanted to know, how did we fail here? What went wrong? And Jesus speaks about faith. Where your faith is. And in this case, they need to fast. Fast from what? You think they need to not eat? Well, they need to not eat some of the words that are passing through their minds, some of the thoughts like, well, this is too hard. I don't know, this is the worst case I've ever seen. But I'll try. All the limitations that we place on our healing. Well, it's going to really take a little time. It's going to take some work. It's going to take some pretty high-power medicine to fix this. Got faith. But where's it placed? Not in the idea that God is a mighty healing power. And as the song says, that mighty healing hand has healing power in it for you. And it works in you and through you. The only thing here that needed to be changed was what they believed, how they thought. Needed to have a new awareness, a greater awareness of that healing power of God. Remember, faith, according to Charles Fillmore, is the perceiving power of the mind linked with the power to shape substance, to perceive health and wholeness as your birthright, to perceive that the spirit of you is whole and well, was created that way. To perceive that when things in your life and in your mind and in your heart become out of balance, God has unlimited healing power. Is there anything too hard for God? Yeah. Your head shaking screams. Because it's true. Nothing is too hard. Nothing can overcome that free-flowing life of God. How we do not question it in small things. And I've asked before times, so how big a cut is it where you start to worry that it won't heal? Last week you just missed seeing me come in with toilet paper stuck to my face. Guys, don't you still do that when you cut yourself shaving? Put the toilet paper on it. Yeah. As the blood ran down my cheek, not 1 second did I think, this will never heal. I'm going to need stitches. Good Lord, I better get to the emergency room. At no point. So how big does it have to be before you think, oh, this is unhealable? Down in the deepest level of the most ill person is a spirit that is light, that is life, that is perfect and whole and well. Probably for me, in my lifetime, the most dramatic spiritual healing occurred in 1970, in Cincinnati. And you've heard about it before when a friend of mine was in an airplane crash. Of the 4 passengers, he was the sole survivor. And I watched that whole process. I actually passed out in the waiting room of the intensive care unit. I had donated blood before I went up there, and I hadn't had breakfast, and I was kind of dehydrated. And I met his mother, and then I kind of went, oops. Kind of came back to consciousness with her holding a cold compress to my forehead. Her son is in ICU. They're not saying he's going to live yet. They introduced me as his brother, and that allowed me to go in twice a day for 5 minutes. As I drove away from the hospital that day, Simon and Garfunkel were singing on my car radio, "Bridge Over Troubled Water." And that struck me in the moment. It got my attention. And then somewhere in my mind came the words, "Someone must know the truth." And then I heard, sensed, "I will give you everything you need." For 30 days, I had no doubt. For the 30 days, I practically continually affirmed Bill's perfect healing. It was 2 times. I would go 2 times a day to the hospital and just sit there. He couldn't talk. He had a tracheotomy, so he couldn't talk. Hold his hand, and I just see him, visualize him, radiant with life and health. Finally, they said, "Well, he's going to live." And then 30 days later, he walked out of the hospital when they weren't sure he was going to walk again. That was a dramatic thing for me to experience. And understand, I could say right with the silent unity worker, it is not I, it was not me. It was something else. But sometimes we're called upon to be a channel through which that intelligence flows. A channel that can call it forth in another. One of those days, Bill stuck his finger over the hole of the tracheotomy and could whisper, "Only when you're here am I out of pain. Only when you're here can I sleep." Something was happening. Energy flowed. And I remember, "I will give you everything you need." One day I took a robe to the hospital. They said, "Oh, he won't need this." The next day I got to the hospital and he was sitting up in the robe. He needed it. How did I know? It was given to me. I know it works. I know it happens. And I know every one of us can work it. Why? Spiritual healing is possible because you're a spiritual being. As a spiritual being, for the flow of this divine healing power, it's built into you. Sometimes we just have an awful lot of stuff that gets in the way. Emily Cady said there's only one presence and one power. There's only God. All else is a lie. And you can't know how many times I have to remind myself there's only God. All else is a lie. When my first thought is of something else. When my faith wants to go to something less than the pure perfection of God. Now, healing is a process of restoring us to that original state in which we were all created, that state in which we were created to be. So it's kind of like Genesis all over again. In the book, I gave you an exercise that started for today and runs for each day of this week. I was blessed with some wonderful teachers, and Evie Ingraham, Ingy, was one of them. And this was a series of lessons that he taught based on those 7 days of creation. And today I give you the first part. It's from the 3rd verse of Genesis. Let there be light. Do you ever say that out loud? Let there be light? Or at some level in your being, are you essentially saying, let there be light, when you wish you had more knowledge, more information, that you knew the answer to some situation or some challenge before you? I think all of us are often speaking that word, let there be light, but we don't let it out. We don't send it forth. We don't realize that we have the power to set this creativity in motion. To attain understanding is light. To ask, to declare, let there be light, is to call forth light in any situation. When you have light, physically you have light, you say, oh, I see. I can see. And then when you understand, oh, I see. The difference between the two is one's physical and the other is mental or spiritual. God is all power, all intelligence at all points. So wherever you are, whatever things appear before you, God is there. There's only God. Anything that appears different is a lie. So the first thing to begin to speak into being is, let there be light. Let us look to the light. Look to the truth of God. Look for understanding so that we too can hear those words. Someone must know the truth. And I will give you what you need. You think I'm so special? Shoot. I don't know why it was me. But you know, at some level, I think Bill and I made an agreement before we came into this world. And he was willing to do what was necessary for me to see that spiritual healing really happens. Because prior to that, it was just a concept, a theory. I really believe that we made that agreement. And oh, by the way, I saw him once after he got out of the hospital. I've never seen him again. And I believe that's because our work was done. And it is because of that that I came to ministerial school. So, reread this section. Back on page 8, in the beginning, are the instructions on how to read it, the prayer work and meditation to do around it. And, of course, there's an affirmation for this day. And the affirmation that goes with this is, together, I am an open channel for the expression of divine wisdom. The Spirit of God is within and around me, and the inspiration of the Almighty gives me understanding. My consciousness is now illumined through my union with the all-knowing and ever-present mind of the Father within me. Work with this. Do this at least once more today. And then in the days ahead, you have 2-3 paragraphs of information about each of the days and steps in recreation, and an affirmation for each one of them. So with joy, remember, it is for us to build a spiritual healing consciousness and to restore healing to the unity movement.